April 16th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
So we'd like to welcome you to a meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media consistent with the Open Public Meetings Act, and that the advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung for the purpose of professional development for the Board of Education members, including generally ethics training, superintendent's evaluation process, and strategic planning provided by the New Jersey School Boards Association. This meeting is being conducted remotely using communication technology. Instructions for joining the meeting and participating in public comments have been posted on the district website and sent to the Watchung Borough and the Watchung Public Library, as well as to the school community through an email blast. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda at a point in the meeting provided for the public to address the board. Recording or photographing other than for private personal use requires the consent of parents/guardians whose children may be included in the image. No action will be taken. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barbella?
Here.
Mr. Buccarelli?
Here.
Mrs. Harvey?
Here.
Mrs. Ingracia?
Here.
Mr. Kraft?
Here.
Mr. Mattiassi is not present. Mrs. Morales?
Here.
Mrs. O'Donnell?
Here.
Mrs. Scharf?
Here.
Okay, 8 present.
And I would, I guess, like to go forward and introduce Gwen Thornton. She is our New Jersey School Board Association representative, and she will be the one who's conducting the board members' code of ethics and the superintendent evaluation process.
Thank you, Dory. Good evening. It's a pleasure to see many of you again. I know some of you have not had the pleasure of meeting in person, so it is a pleasure to meet you. I wish it were in person and not remotely, but those are the conditions that prevail. And so we will do our level best to make this as engaging as I can, even though we are remote. For the new board members, annual ethics training is a requirement under the law, and that is why we're going to start with that. The superintendent evaluation is, again, a statutory requirement. It's the board's opportunity to hold your one employee accountable for their performance throughout the entire year. You have only one employee, the superintendent. You hold him or her accountable for their performance, and they hold all other staff accountable for their performance. So it is an important task, and it's one that I last week sent you a number of links to the materials for the online superintendent evaluation process. I sent them, so Dory should have forwarded them to you, so you should have had an opportunity to at least, I hope, review them. So if you have some questions, I can help you or assist you in better understanding that process altogether. I need to share the screen. Rich, if you can just enable me to share the screen, I can bring up the PowerPoint on the school ethics.
Okay, I believe we're having our technician who's hosting the meeting put the PowerPoint on the screen for you.
Okay.
Okay, I just messaged him to put it up.
Okay. So if you bear with me, it will come up, hopefully momentarily. Thank you.
There it is.
There it is. Perfect. Unfortunately, I can't move it under those circumstances, though, so I'm going to have to ask him to move forward. I don't want to spend a great deal of time on the first couple of slides, but if you could advance to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. The School Ethics Act was enacted in 1992. You can stop right there. And the Ethics Act was enacted to ensure that board members adhere to a minimum level of behavior in regard to their roles and responsibilities, and that's really what's important about it. It is part of CUSAC. For those of you who are new, CUSAC stands for New Jersey Quality Single Accountability Continuum, and it is the state's monitoring process for school districts all across the state. My understanding is it's currently being CUSAC'd at this present moment, however remotely, and it is the state's way of gauging whether you are in compliance with all of the laws and requirements for every district across the state. You go to the next slide, please. The School Ethics Act was established in 2001. They are the group that adjudicates any ethics complaints that are filed against board members. And it includes the requirements that you annually fill out a financial disclosure form, which you must do by April the 30th. That is one of the deadlines that has not been changed by any executive order heretofore. So if you haven't yet filled out your financial disclosure forms, please do so. You should have received an email online from the state of New Jersey requesting that you fill it out and submit it. Out the training requirements for board members, and you can flip to the next slide, please. New board members are required in the first year of their first term to attend training. There are some opportunities for in-person training, but unfortunately, with the difficulties with in-person meetings, it is available online for all new board members, as well as the board training for years 2, 3, and the training for board members in the first year and a subsequent term to which they are elected or appointed. So if you're a new board member, you need to go to new board member orientation. You can have your business administrator register you for that. The reason we ask the business administrator to register you is because it is tracked by the School Ethics Commission, and we have to report the completion of the coursework that you do in a given year to the School Ethics Commission. So there's no cost to the district for any of it, whether it's in person or online, but we are responsible for responding to the School Ethics Commission that you have completed your required training. You can go to the next slide, please. The School Ethics Commission is composed of 9 members who are appointed by the governor, and there are 2 school board members, 2 administrators, and 5 citizens. Hear ethics complaints against board members. Next. The School Ethics Commission issues 2 different types of opinions. They will issue an advisory opinion on a prospective basis, so that if you have a concern that there may be an issue coming before the board that you might have a conflict in regard to participating or voting on, you can ask for the School Ethics Commission's advisory ahead of the issue coming before the board or ahead of the vote being taken. If the School Ethics Commission believes that the advice is on an issue that is of such importance to board members all across the state, they will make their advisory opinions public, removing the district name, removing any board member's name, so that all board members are aware of it. They then also can adjudicate ethics complaints, and anyone can file an ethics complaint against a board member for violating a portion of the code of ethics. So a parent, a community member, another board member, a citizen, anyone can file an ethics complaint against a board member. Next. In 2019, there was only 1 advisory opinion. And so we put this in just so that you would be aware of it, because this was a change. There was a board member who drives a bus for a vendor that serves his district, and he wanted to know on an advisory basis if that was a conflict for him. And so he submitted the information to the Ethics Commission, who then issued this advisory opinion, and they concluded that the board member is working for a private company and there is only very temporal, meaning temporary contact with students and aides, has no authority. And so as long as he did not participate in any discussion around the choice of a busing vendor or any issue regarding the busing vendor for whom he was employed, he could participate fully in board action. So that's an example of a case where someone thought there might be a conflict, asked for advice, and this was the advice that was given. The state made this public so that everyone would be aware if they had a similar circumstance as a board member, it would not be a problem. Okay. The SEC has the School Ethics Commission has the ability to reprimand, censure, suspend, or to remove a board member. And they have done all of these. The reprimand is simply a rebuke by the commissioner. The censure is a formal letter that is sent to the district, has to be adopted by the board as a resolution and posted. Suspension is exactly what that says it is. You're removed from the board for a period of time. Typically, if you fail to file your financial disclosure statements in a timely way, they will remove you, suspend you from the board until you complete those forms, and they can indeed remove someone from office. This School Ethics Commission makes a recommendation to the commissioner who makes a final decision around each of the ethics complaints. And then if you wish to appeal it as a board member, you would do it in the New Jersey Appellate Division of Courts. Next. Okay, these are the actual tenets, these next pieces that are found in 18A, which is the administrative law that governs all Board of Education actions, as well as Administrative Code 6A. And that's as a board member where you would find all of the law and the regulations that govern how boards of education in the state of New Jersey operate. And the first piece is that you will uphold and enforce all laws. I'm not going to read it to you, of the State Board of Ed and court orders. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures. So in essence, every decision the board makes is by majority. You have to make sure that any decision you make is not in conflict with any legal, any law, any regulation of the state of New Jersey or the federal government as well, because the federal government obviously does have educational laws such as the Every Student Succeeds Act and various federal titles that provide districts with different kinds of aid and governance pieces. Okay, next. You're required to make decisions in terms of the welfare of all children and seek to develop and maintain public schools to meet the individual needs of all children. Simply meaning that you can't make decisions just based on what is good for your child, but you need to look at the educational welfare of all children in the Watchung Borough schools and make the very best decisions you can, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. So you need to just keep that in mind as you are making the decisions that you make. Next. You're required to confine your board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal. The board is by definition a policymaking body. That is your major function. You are responsible for creating policies that provide the framework and guideposts for staff, students, and parents and citizens across the district. And you will make those policies and plans only after the board has been consulted, after the board consults those who will be impacted by them, which means that you formulate all of the programs and methods to translate your district goals into reality. And you need to make sure that you are not involving yourself in the day-to-day operations of the school district. So you make policies that provide guideposts, you plan effectively through such instruments as a strategic plan, and the appraisal piece has to do with the evaluation of the superintendent. So you provide oversight, appraisal, and create policies. Next. Okay. Your responsibility is to make sure that you, as a full board, see that the school is well run, but you do not run the schools. You are not to be involved in the day-to-day administration of the school district. Simply meaning you are responsible for having a vision, for representing your community and translating the community's vision for what they want education to look like into goals that are then moved forward by your administration. The board is not there to tell the teachers how to teach. You sit on your board as a lay person. So if you're a CPA, you're not the district's auditor. If you're an attorney, you sit on the board as an attorney, but you're a lay person, you're not the board's attorney. If you're a teacher and that is what you do for your living, that's fine. You sit on the board as a lay person, you're not there to tell the teachers how to teach. You are there to develop policy, to provide a vision for the future, and to work collaboratively with the superintendent and all of your educational professionals to move the district forward. Next. You have to recognize that the authority rests with the Board of Ed, and you cannot take any personal promises or any private action that will compromise the board. This is important to recognize, that unless you are sitting at a duly advertised meeting of the Board of Education, like you are present for this evening, even though we're remote, you have no authority as an individual within your community other than when you are sitting at a meeting that is advertised to take action. And no individual board member has the authority to direct the superintendent or any staff member to act. You only have one employee, that's the superintendent, but a majority of the board is the only group that can guide the actions of the superintendent. So individually, you cannot have any staff member, including the superintendent, act on your behalf. Only a majority of the full board can do that at a duly advertised meeting of the board. You cannot take any actions that may compromise the board. And again, that means you have to stay within the confines of your roles. Oftentimes, members of the public might want an individual board member to help them with a problem or an issue or a concern. The best thing that you can do as a board member is to provide the member of the public, the parent, the community member, with information so that they can access the appropriate personnel within the district who can address their issue. You are, you say what you want to see happen, but making it happen is the responsibility of the administration. So you cannot involve yourself in the day-to-day operations of the district or with staff to solve problems or issues for parents or community members. That is not your role. That is the role of your educational professionals. Next. Making sure that you don't surrender your judgment to any special interest group of any kind, or use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. So you want to make sure that you are nonpartisan and that you are as fair and objective as you can be as you examine issues, looking at every aspect of a particular issue before you make a decision. The notion is that there is collective wisdom in 9 board members or 7 board members discussing an issue and then coming to the very best decision with input and information provided by your educational experts. And so you need to make sure that you are making those decisions based on what is good for children and not on behalf of a particular special interest group or a particular political party. School boards are nonpartisan. Next. You are required to maintain confidentiality of all matters that, if discussed publicly, could injure your students or the schools or your staff. And you are required to provide accurate information and, in collaboration and concert with your colleagues, interpret the aspirations for the community and the school. So you cannot disclose any kind of information that is confidential in regard to students or staff. There are 7 exceptions to the Open Public Meetings Law of items that you can't discuss that fall under attorney-client privilege, the sale of property, negotiations. There is a process by which those items that are confidential, that at some point, once they are resolved, can be made public. There's a process for that to happen, but you need to make sure that you're not accidentally disclosing confidential information to the public that would needlessly subject the district to legal liability. So maintaining this is really an important piece for all board members. And that means not discussing it with your spouse or your children or your friends. You have to keep confidentiality to the board itself. Next. You're required to vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of your chief administrative officer. Simply put, you are allowed to vote no on a personnel appointment, but your reason cannot be arbitrary or capricious. Next. You have to support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. This means that if you have a concern with a staff member, that you make the superintendent aware of it, but you cannot be undermining, criticizing school personnel in public. And so you need to be very careful that you are supporting those folks as they go through their work. And that means no criticism of the staff in public. Next. You are required to refer all complaints to your chief school administrative officer, to the superintendent, and will act on complaints at public meetings only after the failure of an administrative solution. Board members cannot solve administrative issues. They cannot solve staff problems. When you think about it, all of the people in the district, all of your staff have a process by which their concerns can be addressed. Parents can, again, as a new board member, knowing the chain of command, being able to direct the public to where they need to go to get their problem solved at the lowest level is a critically important piece. Next. I'm sorry, I have a crazy dog. Okay. The commissioner decision, you can go past this. I'm not going to take time to do this evening. Next, please. And you can skip through this one too. Okay. There are certain conflicts of interest that you're required to avoid. You cannot have a business interest with the district. You cannot use your position as a board member. You cannot use your position as a board member to secure unwarranted advantage. And certainly you cannot take any gift or favor that was offered with the intent to influence. You cannot involve yourself in any vote that creates a benefit to you that is greater than what someone else would receive. And you should not undertake any service or employment that might prejudice your independent judgment. Okay. Next. So who qualifies as a relative for this? All of those folks, and you can see them, pretty much everybody that you're related to. The School Ethics Commission has a very expansive definition of a relative. You cannot hire a relative of a board member or a chief school administrator. The only exception is if there is no one else who is qualified to be able to do that work. You might be able to get the permission of the executive county superintendent to do that. If you have a relative who already works in the district, you would be precluded from participating in a search for a superintendent or acting on the employment of the relative who works in the district. Next. In terms of collective bargaining, your board attorney is the final arbiter. But we have many board members who belong to the same statewide association as the association in your district. So if you have currently, if you have a relative who works in the district, you cannot participate in negotiations, you cannot vote on the contract. If you have your spouse or dependent child who works in another district, you can't participate in contract negotiations, but you can in fact vote to ratify a contract. If you have a child who is not a dependent who works out of the district, you can do both. You can negotiate as well as vote to ratify the contract. And that's after all of the pieces to the contract have been put together, including the salary guides. Next. Okay. Other possible conflicts, if you have a family member that is supervised by employees in the unit that was employed before you became a board member, that would be a problem. Not in the same unit, you could be an administrator and not in the teachers association, but if their terms of employment are linked to the units together, that would be a problem. Or if you have an immediate family member or a relative who has heightened union involvement. And that heightened union involvement generally means if you have, let's say your spouse is a teacher in another district and they are an officer in the association, or if they're on the negotiations team of their employing district, or if they are a building rep, that would be considered a conflict, okay? It used to be that when you ran for election, if you were endorsed by a local or statewide association, it created a conflict and you were not allowed to participate for a full year in negotiations. The School Ethics Commission has changed that and said it is not a per se conflict unless a financial contribution is given that is intended to influence the member. So again, if you think that you might have an issue, you can talk to your board attorney. Your board attorney would be the best person to help you make those kinds of decisions as to whether you have a conflict or not. Next. Next, please. Thank you. The doctrine of necessity can be invoked if you have too many board members who are conflicted and you cannot vote to appoint a superintendent or to approve a contract. The doctrine of necessity you can talk to your attorney about, but typically it doesn't really happen very often. Volunteerism is a relatively recent phenomenon. This did not exist when I sat on my Board of Education, but it limits the amount of volunteering that board members can do in the school. And generally it is thought that you should refrain from certain activities based upon the amount of interaction with students and staff and the degree to which the school board member would be receiving direction from or to giving direction to students or staff. Board members who volunteer in the school should notify the superintendent of their planned in-school volunteer activity in advance. So we know that you can be a member of the PTA, you can be an officer, you can chaperone a field trip. That certainly those kinds of activities are fine, but you should not be directing students and staff or be an integral part of any school building on a regular basis. Next. Could you move this slide, please? Okay. So here we've tried to simplify it. So if you can answer no to all of these questions, then it's probably okay to volunteer, whether you be giving directions or orders to students or staff. Will you be taking orders from them? Will you be in the school often? Will it seem to visitors that you work in the school? Are you enmeshed in the building? Would you be handling school district money at all? And whether it's student collecting class money for a class trip, you should not be handling school money. So you can, of course, continue to volunteer in any kind of activity that has its own bank bylaws and bank accounts. Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Pop Warner, PTOs, the rec commission programs, anything like that are absolutely fine. But you need to just talk to your superintendent if you're unclear and request input from your board's attorney, again, if you're unclear as to whether you think it's a conflict. We know you can't be an advisor to a school club. You can't be a volunteer to an intramural program at the middle school or a coach in a school district. That's not permitted. But one-shot kind of items that you're volunteering for in the school district should be fine. Okay, next. Okay. They've issued a number of recent decisions around interview committees. A3115, board member involvement in interviews for positions other than that of superintendent is not encouraged. There are some exceptions in very narrow circumstances where it can be 1 or 2 board members only, where your superintendent provides recommendation for such, and then only to provide observations and assessments. You cannot be involved in exit interviews of staff. So you do have that option for high-level administrative positions, typically with the permission and the recommendation of your superintendent, but not ever for teachers or aides or bus drivers or cafeteria folks. That is just not something that is permissible. Next. Okay. Just points to consider. We certainly recommend that if you think you might have a conflict with family members for negotiations, just have your board attorney review that on a regular basis. And then just continue to check school board notes to keep abreast of newly released advisory opinions. There is an expectation of the School Ethics Commission that if they make an advisory opinion public, that board members will be aware of it. And if someone files an ethics charge against a board member for having violated an advisory opinion that was public, they're going to view that more strenuously than if they had never issued the advisory. So we always publish all advisory opinions in school board notes. You receive that electronically. And it's worth just keeping up with those to make sure that you don't make an accidental misstep. Next. So you just always need to remember that your responsibility is to protect the public trust. At the end of the day, I tell boards a lot. We ask people to give us 2 things, the 2 most important things really for most folks. Their children, number 1, and their money, hopefully in that order. And so given that, we have a real obligation to make sure that we are serving the interest of those students and the public, and to really make sure that we are making the very best decisions in the interest of all of those children. And that's really what the Code of Ethics lays out. It's really just guideposts for ensuring that we're making the very best decisions, being fiscally accountable to the community, and ensuring that we don't have conflicts that could be perceived incorrectly. Questions that any of you might have in regard to what I have said? No Board of Education's ever that quiet. Okay.
Out there, Gwen. Do you want to just talk maybe a tiny bit more about, obviously, we've all read the ethics and have familiarized ourselves with them. I find that maybe sometimes putting it into practice, you end up having questions about what's permissible and what's not enough involvement, too much involvement. In terms of maybe committee work, where people do tend to get into discussions on the various topics assigned to committees, can you talk a little about sort of the delineation of responsibilities? And obviously the ethics talk a lot about day-to-day and how that's obviously the CSA's job, but you're there to provide your feedback, and you do want to collaborate on the vision and the mission in the district. How do you reconcile those two responsibilities? Like in committee work?
Sure. So in essence, you operate with a committee system, and I'm assuming that you have several committees whose work is focused around the district goals, moving the district forward, whether it's your education/curriculum committee that focuses around what the curriculum should look like, updates and changes, all those kinds of pieces. I'm sure you have a committee that focuses on operations or finance facilities. Generally, there's a policy committee whose responsibility it is to create policy. All of those groups of folks are really doing the work of the full board and helping to do that work by working in committees. Committees can recommend to the full board, but committees do not have any authority to bind the full board. Anything that a committee recommends or doesn't recommend should come before the board. The agendas for the work of the district generally are developed by the administrator responsible for that particular committee, along with the chair and the members of that committee, so that anything that the board wishes to do needs to run through the appropriate committee process before it makes it to the floor for a full board discussion. So typically, that is how a committee would function. Committees should have minutes, they should have meetings, and that should outline what was discussed, what's recommended, what was done, if something was not recommended, why it wasn't recommended, and then all of that information gets discussed with the full board, along with any kind of recommendations for taking action that will move the district forward in whatever particular area. You all are just in the process of doing the budget for next year. Quite a challenge, given the changes in we are operating in this particular year. But given that, the Finance Committee, or if you have one, is going to recommend to the board the adoption of the budget, which was put together by your administration, talked about with the Finance Committee and with the full board. Obviously, a public hearing with the public to make them aware of that. But it only becomes the work of the board when the board discusses it, votes, and makes a decision to move something forward. When you adopt the budget, or you've already adopted, obviously, the tentative budget's gone to the executive county superintendent. But that is the work of the board. It is not the work of the board to write the budget. It is the work of the board to review the budget, to ask questions, to make sure that the budget is supporting your vision and it is supporting student achievement and improving instruction and improving the lives of the children in the district. But it's not to write the budget. It is not your job to create the budget. It is to provide oversight to that process, to set the parameters for that process, and then to make sure that it is supporting those initiatives that the board has identified, the full board, as being of critical importance to the district. Does that help, Jessica?
Yeah, thank you.
It's Rich. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So, that's a nice theoretical explanation I agree with. You mentioned curriculum and you mentioned the word updates. There's an elephant in the room today, which is that we're in a global pandemic, the likes of which nobody living has ever seen before.
I know.
It is unprecedented. It has shut down the schools for the month. They're shut down for another month. They may be shut down for the whole year. They may be shut down for part or all of next year. So would you consider a curriculum committee to be overstepping its bounds if it wanted to talk about distance learning with the CSA?
It depends. if you're talking about the distance learning platform, if you're talking about the distance learning as an instructional mode, I don't think that's problematic. But you at reorganization have already adopted a curriculum, and which is the responsibility of the board, is to adopt the curriculum, which you've done. The remote learning plan is a different platform for delivery of that curriculum. It is a different method of instruction. So I would think that the role for the board here would be to understand what that remote learning platform looked like, to see and get feedback as you move through it, because as you said, in your own words, which are so true, this is unprecedented. It's not something we have not lived through. This is the first time that districts are 100% going to a remote instructional program for their kids. So clearly there's going to be feedback that will be gained and lessons learned. Essentially most districts were, flying the plane while they were building it to accomplish that. So I understand that there's a lot of concern and questions about how is this working? How well is it working? How do we assess what kids are learning? Hoping desperately that there's not learning loss. How do we make that up if there is? How do we assess what the teachers are doing? There's a whole host of questions that go with all of that. But it's not for the board to direct the superintendent as to what platform to choose or specifically what the teachers are to teach. It is rather to provide oversight and then reflection and input, from what you're hearing from parents. What are you hearing? What is working? For second and third graders or kindergartners, what does this look like versus for a sixth grader? There are a lot of issues around this. Does everyone have an appropriate device? Do they have internet access? Are they able to accomplish it in the amount of time? We have the commissioner said, this is a time to lead with compassion and humanity.
Gwen.
Working at home.
Yeah,
Yes.
Gwen,
can I just finish my inquiry, and I'm just going to, and then I'll be quiet, okay? I work for a very large corporation of 50,000 plus people. The business plan that we had 3 months ago is completely out the door and is completely changed. I think that any curriculum plan that you made on how to teach is probably not adaptable to in the best way to a distance learning plan, and it has more to do. It's more than just the platform you're using. It's more than just Zoom or Google or delivery. It's actually how you're taught. So, I would urge people to think in a bigger way about whether a curriculum adopted in an environment where everybody was going to school every day and there was a teacher sitting there live teaching for hours and hours versus what's going on today in distance learning would be maybe more than just a question that the board is able to opine on with respect to how the platform is being delivered. And that's my own opinion.
I would agree with you. Scope and sequence is going to look different. The actual methodology for instruction is going to look different. The feedback is going to look different. It is all going to look different. There's no doubt that that's correct. In the same way that your business plan has to change to adapt to the pandemic, the instructional program has to adjust. It may be the way that you're defining curriculum and the way I'm defining curriculum are different. Curriculum is really about what students need to know and be able to do, and it's based on the New Jersey Student Learning Standards, and the program is tied to that. So the adjustments may be in methodology, it may be in the scope and sequence. It may be in the timeframes. It may be the amount of standards that can be covered, or rearranging those pieces. But that is the work of your educational professionals. That is not really the work of the board.
Gwen, Jen Scharf here. So question, and correct me if I'm wrong, if with things changing with the curriculum, with the distance plan, it is the job of the board and the curriculum committee to review and hear what plans are before they're unveiled to the community. Would that be correct?
They've already been unveiled, right? I mean, you are.
Yes, they have.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
No, I mean, I think the question is the curriculum based on standards, New Jersey learning standards. If that changes in the midst of this pandemic, I think the board does have to approve changes to a curriculum. But if it has not changed and you're delivering that standards-based curriculum in a different manner, whether that's,
Yes, but with what Mr. Bucarelli just said, these are times that we've never experienced before. And when we are unveiling things like a distance learning plan, otherwise, what really is the point of a curriculum committee if they don't have the opportunity to hear what is being presented to the community, is my point.
I mean, I think Gwen can confirm that, but it was our understanding, and I think it was expressed to the board, that the county superintendent approved the distance learning plans, not individual boards.
I'm referring to the update, not the initial plan.
But if you don't approve the distance learning plan, why would you approve an update?
If I could jump in, this is Dory. I just wanted to say that, you know, I've talked to Gwen a lot, and I understand that there's a lot of caution with, you know, the educators on the board, and just being an educator and professionally delivering currently a virtual education platform to my students, and then working at home with my two children and delivering the curriculum that our district has set forth in whatever platform that has been decided. I think that, you know, Jen's going through the same thing, and it definitely gives us a unique perspective that we definitely don't mind sharing. And also questioning items that occur in the curriculum committee with enhancing the experience for the kids. I don't believe, and I don't feel that any of the board members have any intention of dictating how materials should be disseminated to students in our district. And I don't have time to do that or even have any desire to do that. But I feel that the sharing of experiences and ideas are vital to helping our administration create an even better experience for the kids. And no one is saying at this point in time, including our administration, all of our teachers, or anyone who's a teacher, that anybody is an expert on the virtual learning experience at this point. So collaboration to me is extremely important in sharing these ideas for us to improve. And I embrace the process of utilizing all of our resources and assets in hopes of us doing that. And there are board members who are assets that should definitely be utilized. No one is saying that they are dictating to administrators how to have that educational experience given to the kids, but the collaboration is important.
And I think having feedback from the board members is perfectly appropriate. And in hearing from parents, because they're the ones that are living it, right? They're the ones that are working with their children at home or their guardians to assist them. And again, you know, it's going to be not perfect, obviously, because nothing is perfect, but this has been a dramatic change. And so I think it's appropriate for the curriculum committee to get feedback, to get information around how it's going, what the teachers are feeling. Your administration can speaks to the teachers, I am sure, regularly and religiously, and has some sense of how they feel it's going, and what may need to be changed or altered moving forward, what can be tweaked, what can be made better. I think that that's perfectly appropriate. But that's different than changing the curriculum. And that's why I was saying it may be around the definition of curriculum that was misunderstood.
Yeah, I can be clear. I have no desire to change curriculum.
Any other questions? Okay, if we could move on to the superintendent evaluation and close this slide presentation. Okay, thank you. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so we're just going to talk about what are the legal guidelines, what the process looks like, and online access. You can go to the next slide. The board's required to do this annually. It's required to do it in writing. The full board and superintendent must meet to review the evaluation once it's finalized. State law says that the evaluation will be based on goals and objectives of the district and their responsibilities and other criteria as prescribed by the State Board of Ed. Those are incorporated in your job description that you have in your policy manual for the superintendent. The administrative code says the deadline is July the 1st. And it says that when you have your discussion with your superintendent, you need to make sure that you identify areas of strength, any areas needing improvement, any recommendations for professional growth and development that you think would be helpful, and then indicators of student progress and growth. Those typically are standardized test scores, those indicators that are attached to the evaluation. This year, we're going to have to use last year's because you're not going to have any standardized assessments K-8 to attach because the state has waived all of those assessments for the year. Okay, you're required to have this meeting a summary conference that includes a majority of the total board membership. Next. Again, going back to CUSAC, if you do not complete it in the statutorily required time, you can lose up to 13 points in your governance district performance review. So you want to make sure that you complete that process in a timely way. July 1st may seem like it's ages away, but in these days, time does seem perhaps for some folks to go slowly, but you will get to July 1st sooner than you think. So I would encourage you to begin that process sooner rather than later. While the governor has extended deadlines for evaluations for other kinds of staff, they have not changed the deadline as of now for the superintendent. It is still July the 1st. Okay, next. Okay, here's a suggested calendar. And really this process begins when you set your district goals, because your district goals become what you measure for the superintendent on an annual basis. Was there sufficient progress made? Were the goals achieved? Was there inadequate progress made? So really this process begins when you set those goals in July, June or July of a given year. But we are now up to April, And it's really when you should begin the evaluation process itself, that evaluation. You have a brand new superintendent who only began, as I understand, in November. So you're only measuring the period between November and when you complete that evaluation. Next. Okay. The evaluation tool provides opportunities for the superintendent to provide documentation around the various kinds of things that have happened. It asks the superintendent to provide a assessment, and then for board members to provide their assessment. There's areas in the document to provide written comment to substantiate your assessment. And is, as with any document and any decision, the written report must reflect the majority opinion of the board. At the evaluation conference, when you sit down to review the evaluation with the superintendent, if a board member has a different perspective than the majority, you have an opportunity at that conference to be heard. And so the minority voice is protected. It's always the case. Next, please. You're going to, as I said, it began with goal setting. Typically over the course of a year, a board receives progresses or updates, at least quarterly on the district goals. You would hold a pre-conference, but again, with this remote piece, it's going to be rather difficult to hold a pre-conference. But the first step in the process, which is where you would be now, would be the superintendent to enter his goals and his assessments. Once he does that, you receive an email from me to you saying that your superintendent has completed his assessment, and you are then able to go online and enter your assessment and your remarks and comments, okay? Once that is finished, the document is compiled. It's completely anonymous, so no one can identify who said what or who provided what remarks and or assessments. It comes back to you as a document. You can meet to review the compilation, and then the full board meets with the superintendent. Non-conflicted board members only, but I don't think you have any conflicted board members. And whenever you meet to discuss an individual's performance, you have to send a rice notice. So you need to make sure that you rice the superintendent before you hold those meetings. Next, and for new board members, a rice notice is just named after a particular legal case that says any staff member, any employee is entitled to notification of when the board is going to discuss performance, and the employee has the right to ask that it be held in open public if they so choose to do so, okay? The pre-conference really is to discuss and just get an update, a final update on the goals, and to really set those calendar dates or benchmarks for when you're going to complete parts of the process so that you finish in a timely way before July 1st. When you CUSAC, the executive county superintendent is going to ask to see that the document was completed by July the 1st. Next. This is what the goals look like. You can see that there's a spot for the superintendent to enter his goals. The CSA puts in his assessment first. When you look at it online, you will then be able to say the goal was either achieved, satisfactory progress was made, or little or no progress was made. There's a spot for the superintendent to enter comments that support the rating, and then there's a spot that will expand for board members as well. All of these boxes, obviously, as you enter information, will expand to allow you to provide evidence to support your rating. So if you say there wasn't sufficient progress made on a goal, I would encourage you to say, why not? If someone has achieved a goal, again, I would encourage you to take the time to say why you believe that goal was achieved, okay? And I think that that's an important piece to provide as much information as you can. At the end of the day, the intent of the superintendent's evaluation, as with any evaluation of any employee, to provide information and to use it as a communications tool. So the more comments, the more dialogue that you provide, obviously, the better. Next. Okay. In addition to the goals, there are standards that are incorporated that really identify and are around the work of the superintendent and assist boards in identifying where those areas of strength may be in the role of the superintendent. So they're around operations. If you go to the next slide, you can see what the evaluation standards are around: mission, vision, and core values, governance, ethics, professional norms, operation management, curriculum, instruction, assessment, school improvement, community of care, equity and family engagement, and then professional capacity, the community of school district personnel. So those are all of the areas that the superintendent is really responsible for. And in the next slide you can go to, you will see there is an example of the standard. You can read the standard. We've included for you some resources. So for standard 1, around mission, vision, and core values, how would you as a board member know what was done in that area? Well, you might look at agenda or minutes from strategic planning. You might see where there's a connection between the allocation and the budget and your mission and your vision. And again, we've also provided an opportunity for your superintendent to provide links for you, the board members, to look at from the work that they have done over the year, included right in the evaluation. So as you're going through the evaluation, you'll be able to click on a link there if your superintendent includes it and see the evidence of what has been accomplished in a particular standard area. The next slide, please. There is a rubric, and each standard has different language for each of the standards. So exemplary in this standard reads one way, and another standard it reads another. So you're going to have to read the rubric for every one of the standards. I would like to highlight for all of you the last one that says not observed. Because you have not had a full year to work with your superintendent, or perhaps because you're a new board member, you have not had a full year's worth of work with the superintendent either to observe the superintendent in all of these areas. So if you feel that you can't make a judgment, you can simply check not observed. It is neither a positive or a negative, it's a complete neutral. But it is an observation that you just simply don't have enough information or experience in that area with the superintendent to make a judgment. So we have included that in order to assist particularly new board members who may not be comfortable. Next slide. So here you can see on standard 1, there are indicators under each standard. Each of the indicators build toward that standard. Each of those 7 pieces build toward achievement of the overall standard. And this board member rated the superintendent exemplary in 2 categories and proficient in the remaining 5. It asks you to provide an overall assessment of the standards. So one of the ways that you can look at this is you can look at how you've marked, how this board member marked the superintendent, and clearly they believe that in this particular standard, the superintendent was proficient. So by looking at the rubrics and looking at the indicators should help you to make the most informed decision that you can and make your overall assessment of a standard fairly easily. Next. Okay. We'll compile the individual responses. I can't see your individual response. I simply hit a button and the computer does the magic and it compiles everything. You're going to send a RICE notice again to the superintendent. The board meets, reviews, discusses the compilation to arrive at the majority opinion. And then the board president or a designee writes annual performance report. That again highlights areas of performance strength, areas in need of improvement, indicators of student achievement, and professional development or growth that they might believe would be helpful. Next. Okay. Here's a copy of the template, and I sent this to you as well so that you could, it's in a Word document. And again, you can use this. You can write a narrative if you choose. You don't have to use this template, but we put this together because this seemed to be where boards struggled the most, was in terms of coming to consensus around the overall summary report, and this enabled them to do this, we thought, rather easily. The next slide, please. Okay. Again, in the area for the standards, you know, however you rate someone, please provide remarks that support your rating. Again, it is a communications tool. It's designed to ensure that the board and the superintendent stay on the same page. And the best way to do that is to provide information. You know, if you say someone's doing an exemplary job in a particular area, I think it's as important as anything else to say, here's why I believe, because skills are transferable. So the more information you provide, the better the evaluation overall will be. Next. Okay. Again, here, this is from the template. So as you're doing it, you will provide supporting remarks around each of this. Which of these are the strengths? And you can check more than one box. Which of these areas may need required professional growth and improvement? You can check one, you can check none. Again, it is up to the board and what they determine. Next. The board is going to meet. You have to send a rice notice. And again, this is an important piece. Once you have had that meeting, it's an executive session. The board president signs a copy and dates it. The superintendent signs a copy and dates it. As with every one of your certified staff in the district, the superintendent has 10 days to attach anything to the evaluation that he or she believes would help clarify, elucidate, further explain anything in the evaluation. Signature, again, this is for all certified employees, teachers, supervisors, principals. Their signature does not mean agreement with or disagreement with the evaluation. It's just how the law is structured. Okay, next. Okay, this is our homepage. If you haven't been on, www.njsba. If you go to the front page, all the way at the bottom right, click on online evaluation for superintendents and boards. It will take you to another screen. You use your username and password. Your username is the email address you have registered with your district business administrator. So you should use a district email and not your personal email addresses. District business should be done under your district email. So clarify with your business administrator if you're not sure if you're receiving email through the district email system or whether you're doing it through your own personal one. Okay, next. Okay, just points to consider. This is not a once in a year event. This is really an ongoing process. You're reviewing performance for a full year. We suggest superintendents develop a system to retain evidence so that you can provide those links to the board that they can look at. Progress updates and two-way communication is always critical. And it really is the responsibility of all eligible board members to fully participate. Your board president should not have to chase you around to finish this in a timely way, which is why setting a calendar is important. And I would just like to add, you know, a comment around the goals portion of the document. This year in particular, we are finding that a lot of the district goals, because they are tied to assessments, are not able to be completed. Assessments are not going to be given. And so there are a number of superintendents that are either adding a goal around the development and implementation of remote learning, because that's something that has consumed virtually 24 hours a day, 7 days a week since March, whatever, when we went to this. And so you just need to be thoughtful about what goals can be completed reasonably, given the shortened amount of time that your superintendent has been employed. It has not been a full year. And also for every district, the pandemic has become a significant challenge. Just in terms of there are no assessments. And you know, the governor has issued a number of executive orders and have removed from every educator all of the student achievement components to the teacher evaluations, the principal's evaluations, the vice principal's evaluation, and have said that the resulting lack of evidence for the required component did not negatively impact the overall integrity of an educator's evaluation. So again, we would encourage you to think about that and have a discussion around what is reasonable and what you can expect, given that the majority of your goals in your district all tied to those, at least that was my understanding, tied to those evaluative pieces. Questions?
Gwen, this is Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Hi. I do have a couple questions. Since there are 11 goals, and there should only be 4 or 5 goals, as I understand, and has been
That's
on
correct.
both boards, and all of ours, like you said, are directed on performance for different grade levels, each of the
Right.
goals. Where would we start? Do we have, as a board, have to get together and rewrite the goals for George, or is this where you can help us put some basic goals that the state might be suggesting for this time period?
I don't think you really have time to get together as a board and rewrite those goals. My recommendation in this regard would be to have a goal around the development and implementation, the launch, and ongoing oversight of the remote learning plan, because that's what the state is suggesting, because that has become the primary focus of the superintendent's work in every school district. So that is one piece. I think, you know, I would have recommended to the board back in November that perhaps another goal for every brand new superintendent, and I don't mean new to the district, brand new, is to establish himself or herself as the educational leader of the community. And I think that that is a very reasonable goal as well, because I think that that's a huge piece, is developing those relationships with your community, with the parents, with the staff, with the students. And it's measurable and certainly doable, especially given the nature of this pandemic. So you don't have to have 5 goals or 4 goals, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect you could consolidate and use those academic goals, because you're just not going to have the data to be able to objectively measure that, at least not now.
Okay.
Hey, Gwen, this is Rich. You said
Yes.
something at the beginning about those academic goals, which I think might be, you know, very unfair to George Alexis as a new CSA. And I want to know how we can mitigate this, because I thought I heard you say that we weren't going to use current test scores. We were going to use last year's test scores, which George had absolutely nothing to do with. And
When I said use them, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You have to attach some kind of standardized test scores. For years, because of the time frame in which the assessments are given and the results returned, Rich, districts end up using the preceding years. I know it doesn't make sense. It's one of those pieces of the educational system I can't explain to you. The only difference would be in some high school districts, you would have current SAT, ACTs, you would have some current, perhaps AP scores back, and you could attach those. But because of the way the park scores, originally they told districts park scores would be available, 2 weeks after they were given. And then it was 2 months, and then it faded into months and months. And so they were never back in time to use the current school year you were evaluating student scores. So it's
Gwen,
that would be unfair to George on purpose. They just don't exist.
Gwen, it's George, Alexis. To Rich's point, I think that's a good one, and I agree with him. But to Gail's question, Gwen, what would be the process? Because you had mentioned about the meeting, the pre-conference that's supposed to take place. I don't know that we're in a position to waive that. Can we do it remotely? And is that a good time to suggest?
You could do
goals
that
that we could
remotely?
use?
Yes.
Okay, and is that a good time to collaborate with the board and work on 3 goals that we could use?
I
going
would think,
forward? Because
but
otherwise we have no goals.
right. And so I would suggest that that is a good time to do it. You could do it at a board meeting and hold that pre-conference and identify 3 goals. I would not do more than 3 goals just because of the time frame between November and when the board needs to finish this in order to have it completed by July 1. It does not give you a great deal of time. That's why goal setting for boards generally takes place in the June timeframe for the following school year, so that you have the summer to develop action plans, and then you have a full year to do the work to make progress toward achievement of those goals. We're in a truncated year, truncated by the time that you started in the district, and then sort of the double whammy of the pandemic on top of it.
Remind us what the time frame for the pre-conferences?
You can, I would do that at your next work session, your next board meeting. I wouldn't delay it any longer than that.
Well, that's on Monday. Our next
Okay.
board meeting's on Monday.
Okay, that would seem to be doable to me, if you have time to add it to the agenda.
And that's done in regular session, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions in regard to?
Gwen, it's Gail again. So my question also is, should some sort of means, so we don't lose points due to not getting an evaluation completed, but understanding that George came in November, needless to say, our goals were all on one, so that it's explained that we needed to redo goals and we had to,
And you can
we
put
have
that,
to change.
you can put that in the summary report.
Okay,
That these goals
okay.
were created
Good.
at such and such a time. They reflect the fact that this was not a full school year.
Okay.
You essentially November, December, January, February, and by March 12th, 13th, life changed. So
Right, okay.
You can put that right in the summary report. Okay, that's the important piece, is that document done. Other questions that I can answer for you? I know that you can take off the, thank you, slideshow. I know that the other piece that you all wanted to at least think about or discuss was the strategic plan and how strategic planning relates to goals. Typically, you have a strategic plan in place, but there were never any action plans, was my understanding, that were written to make that a reality. So I think it's very difficult to use that strategic plan other than those broad topics for which objectives could be determined as you think about goals for next year, and that you should get together and once you've completed this evaluation process in sometime, meet and develop very specific measurable goals that reflect the vision of the board. They can come from those broader topics, if you'd like, included in the strategic plan that was done by your community. It would just be very difficult, given these conditions, to do a new strategic plan and to gather people together, which is essential to have your staff participate, your community, your parents, your local officials, police, fire, town council, all of those folks involved in this process. It's very hard to do that remotely. So you may want to consider waiting until such time to create a new strategic plan, as that's a possibility. And I certainly can't speak to when that will be, because I don't have any kind of crystal ball. But you certainly do need to have for next year goals that reflect your vision as a board for where you want to move the district and how you're going to provide those ideas to your superintendent. Those are set with input from your administration, which is going to be a little more challenging because we aren't going to have those assessments to help guide. And we're not going to know what kind of student learning loss, hopefully not lots, but we won't know that exactly. So what does that look like? How do we need to think perhaps differently about what school looks like when it reconvenes, and what we need to do to measure and to see where kids are and how we move forward, and what kind of social emotional impacts has this had on everyone? You know, I think that this has been really very challenging for not just education, but for society as a whole. And I think its impacts are perhaps for children maybe longer lasting in ways we don't necessarily see at this point in time, that may truly impact their lives. So I think, you know, having those conversations in June, or even, you know, in committee, perhaps ahead of that, and thinking forward, what are the things that we can do if we open in September? What are the kinds of things that, you know, we'll do if we don't open in September? What will that look like? It's hard to have that kind of crystal ball. Everybody's sort of living in, you know, 2-week increments at this point in time. But you have to, as a board, you know, try to think long term about what that's going to look like, and that's not an easy task. Dory, is there anything else that I can help you, assist you, any of you?
I think that
I just had a
for the
comment on, since we are on the strategic plan topic, before we move off of that.
Sure.
Had a chance to re-review it today, and I had 3 observations, and those were that basically I don't know what the process was actually that the board went through to do this, but it was a very general plan. There were no specific measurable objectives.
Yes.
And the thing that actually struck me as, you know, kind of the scariest thing, first of all, I also think that we weren't honest in our assessment of what our strengths were, given the situation. I think if I look at this, and I've been a resident for, you know, 29 years. Our strengths were our strengths 15 years ago, not necessarily our strengths now. The objectives, but the fact that if you look at the timeline, it took 1 year to do a 12-page PowerPoint with nothing specific in it. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, the lack of urgency and action that has been characterized by this district for the past several years. And I would urge our board to think very hard about improving that, that we have urgency, that we do take action, and that we have honest assessments. That was, those were my observations on what we should do with a new strategic plan if we do.
Yeah, I think that.
Thank you.
Thanks. This is Dory. I think that's what I kind of sent around to the board. A lot of board members were discussing the strategic plan because it was so broad and it didn't have a lot of details in it. And then just figuring out if, I think this goes until 2023, I believe. And then the board just figuring out if they wanted to amend what was there, or if when we got back into a physical situation, to actually just start the process again. And then, obviously what would be the benefits and disadvantages of both, of either amending it or just redoing it. And then there were discussions in, about climate surveys as well. So it was discussed whether the climate survey would just be incorporated into the strategic plan process if we decided to redo it, or if the board wanted to, I guess, set up some type of system where, I think because to this day, since Jessica, Rich and I have gotten on, we haven't done a climate survey. And that's great data for us to have as a board and administration to use towards setting, some of our goals. So I didn't know if the board just wanted to incorporate it into that process, or if the board was interested in potentially creating just general times of the year when we do conduct climate surveys that are separate from the strategic plan. I did speak to Gwen about it, and obviously we discussed the maybe the better time in order for a climate survey to go out, and right now obviously would not be the best time in our district for that to happen, and probably not even right as we went back in September. So that was a discussion that, it's open for the board. If you guys have any suggestions or your own opinion about it, this is the time that we can discuss those things together.
This is Gail. Gwen, doesn't the NJSBA have certain climate surveys already that can be utilized when we're ready?
The Department of Education has them.
Okay, I thought so. Okay, yeah, all right.
They have them.
We did look at those last year, I think, because the board had voted to conduct a climate survey, and then kind of spun wheels in committees looking at different questions that the DOE surveys had and how we could amend them. And it just kind of got into analysis paralysis, which is unfortunate because now, however long this lasts, I agree, Dory, that it's an inopportune time to do additional climate survey when you're in the middle of unprecedented chaos, with distance learning and stuff. I do think there might be a lot of relevance for a type of survey during this crisis. I think that might be a good way. I know it doesn't necessarily touch on a strategic planning process, but it could inform, at the very least, if we're making this a goal area for any evaluation or just for a district goal. I know I've think that surveys are always a good idea to get a wide scope of opinions, not just people who, are willing to email or come to a board meeting. It might be something to discuss so that we don't waste another 6 months doing nothing because it's not a good time to start a strategic planning cycle,
Other thoughts that board members have?
This is Gail again. I agree with Rich. I do think that we need to be ahead of the curve. And by doing so, maybe having a survey, a climate survey go out at this point to even learn if we end up in a situation like this again, what we can do. Maybe there's so many professionals out there, parents and so forth, that have so many wonderful thoughts about distance learning. Maybe it would be a good idea, maybe at the end of the year, to send it out in hopes that they'll write back and let us know some of the things that would be advantageous and what are not.
Yeah, we're definitely getting this story again. We're
That will
definitely
help
getting
inform it.
emails regarding parents' opinions on it, which are good to see their the things that work and the things that they feel could be improved upon. So I agree, Gail. That's what we're here to do as board members too, is we're representatives of our community. So hearing from them and getting their feedback. Not only are our teachers, on the front lines, but so are our parents at this point in helping with this distance learning. So getting that feedback from them could help in making it a better experience. So if you guys
agree.
Yeah, if you guys agree on that, that maybe that's something that, do we really need for that to go into a committee, or so that we can get questions ready and start working on it so that it could be something that could roll out by the end of the school year?
I'm supportive of that, Dory. I think it's a great idea. There's definitely going to be a lot of opinions, and I appreciate the fact that no one, whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, was really prepared for this. So people are managing as best they can, but really the excuses go out the window once you've had time to begin to prepare and can learn from what we're going through, and to the best of our ability take input to start that planning. It's never going to be perfect, but certainly could be enhanced and improved. So I'm fully supportive of that. I bet you on this topic, because again, as you mentioned, it's not just the teachers, it's the parents, it's everyone. We're gonna get a lot of opinions on how to do things.
Yeah, just a suggestion, and maybe we don't want to wait till the end of the year to do this type of survey, especially around distance learning, because the time frame is so uncertain. As it is right now, it's extended another month. So I think if we could take feedback more timely and implement, it would be better for all in the district.
That's a good idea too, Mallory. This is Dory again, because the teachers don't necessarily work over the summer. So if anything needed to be modified by the teachers or from the administration, hearing about it sooner than later while they're still in school until June could benefit us. Otherwise, it's kind of waiting until September to give the teachers all of this feedback. And then, I think it's a little unfair of us to then suggest, okay, now make these changes where, we could potentially start that sooner.
Yeah.
I read that some districts were doing weekly surveys, and I imagine they're pretty quick to get up and running. So I would agree with that, certainly. The other just thing to consider is that, of course, very different situation last year, but I think there was some dissatisfaction that it was assigned to a particular committee because, you know, something like a survey of our community is something that, you know, all board members would be interested in seeing, looking at. So, you know, if there's a way to, without bogging down our meetings and having lengthy discussions in public meetings, maybe each committee can take a look and make changes, work on it in small groups, but to have it in one particular committee, there's always these topics that seem to, you know, it's kind of like pick a committee, any committee, what should this live in? But really it's because it touches on, so we're so interconnected with the functions of a school district that I think it could be well served if all board members could participate in some way.
Sounds good. Does anybody have any other suggestions or topics they want to talk about before we move into the comments from the public? Okay, hearing none.
Dory,
Go ahead,
before
Gwen,
you
I'm
open
sorry.
to the public, I'm going to take my leave, but thank you for the opportunity to speak with all of you. I spend my days before the pandemic talking to board members. So you are always welcome as individual board members to reach out to me if you have questions or concerns. If I don't have an answer for you, if it's a policy issue or a labor issue and I don't have an answer, I can refer you to someone or get the answer for you. But I am very happy to talk to board members. I don't share our conversations with other board members or your administration. We are here just to help you be the most effective board members that you can be. So thank you for continuing to do great work for your kids in this time. Remotely or non-remotely, it's a stressful period of time for a lot of folks with their kids home and working from home, which may not be something you're accustomed to in addition to everything else in your life. So thank you for your continued service for boards. And if there's anything we can do, please don't hesitate to let me know. So thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you, Gwen.
I know this wasn't, the language wasn't on the agenda, but I was just going to read the information for the comments from the public, if that's okay, because I would presume it pertains to this situation. We welcome input from the public. Total time allotted for public comment is 30 minutes. Before you make your comment, please state your name and address. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 30 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by a participant to 3 minutes duration. Our public forums are not structured as a question and answer session, but rather are offered as opportunities to share your input with the board. In instances where the board feels a response is needed, the presiding officer or superintendent will address the comment. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel or hiring in public session. Names of students should not be used. So we are open for public comment. I'm going to let you handle that, Mr. Pepe.
Okay, also I want to just read, the usual
Oh, yes.
comment that we have. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of legal rights of those affected and identified in their comments, and be aware that they are personally legally responsible with potential liability for comments that they make to the board. The board shall not be held liable for comments made by members of the public. And for tonight, this is our first time doing a board meeting this way, so I'll just share with you what we're going to do for public comment. We have all the microphones muted for participants other than board members. However, you all have the ability to click on the button that says raise hand. So as we see people raise hands, I will direct our host one at a time to unmute their microphone and give them their time to speak, make their comments. As soon as they indicate they're finished, you will remute and so that we can move on to the next comment where board members can make their comments if they feel necessary. Okay, we have a comment, just a second. Okay. When you're making a comment, the first person has been unmuted. When you're making a comment, please make sure to state your name and address for the record. Thank you. Stacy, that's you.
Thanks. I wasn't sure how this worked. Stacy and Bimbo, Watchung Borough teacher and co-president of the Teachers Union. I just wanted to speak very briefly on behalf of the teaching staff and openly express our sincere gratitude to all administration, including Mr. Alexis, Mrs. Dobrowansky, Mrs. Kidd, Mr. Toda, and Mr. Pepe, who have all been incredibly supportive to the teachers, to the community. They have been accessible no matter when we need them. We have myself and John, the other co-president of the Teachers Union, have been meeting with each administrator regularly. And this has been a wonderful and collaborative relationship, especially to deal with, what we're all dealing with right now. It's been incredible to have such amazing support from the top down, and we can't thank you enough. We also want to recognize the board members who are no doubt working tirelessly behind the scenes to also support the school and try to continue to think, outside of the box to make sure the children are still getting everything that they need. We do also want to recognize the parents who have essentially become our colleagues during this very difficult time. We thank you so much for your support and everything you're doing with your children at home. Also, we want to recognize the children who obviously aren't on this call, but we do want to thank the children for, their lives have been totally uprooted and their normal is completely gone. And the way that they have stepped up to a totally new learning platform and have continued to make strides and be as successful as they were in the classroom is remarkable. So we do want to thank the children. And lastly, I just want to thank my colleagues who have, been working tirelessly to collaborate with one another. And, somebody's strengths is somebody else's weakness, and everybody has stepped up to lend support in every single capacity. And so despite the, horrible situation we've been put in, I really do think it has made us stronger together. And we have all been able to work collaboratively, and it really is from the top down. So we really, we are very grateful for the administration's support, their availability, and everybody else that was mentioned as well. I hope everybody is well and healthy, and we're thinking of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Next up will be Elizabeth Bonowitz. Just need to get you unmuted.
All right, hi everybody. I guess I won't start video, just be audio. I just wanted to second Ms. Nbibo's thanks to the administration, but I also just want to say a thank you to the teachers. As a parent, I've been watching, there's a bit of a learning curve with all of this for everybody, and I think it's actually been going quite well. I've been very surprised by how my children's work day actually conforms to a school day relatively easily. The teachers have been incredible in terms of being on top of assignments, getting back to all 20 different little things that have to get submitted across all the different areas. They've just been incredibly strong in that respect. I know a lot of parents have some frustrations here and there about small issues, but I just wanted to say as a parent, even despite the fact that I'm trying to figure out how to work my regular work week and be a teacher, that I think that it's been actually surprisingly effective right now. And I think that's in no small part due to the teachers. I wanted to raise two small points. The first is I just wanted to second the the suggestion by Ms. Morales and others that maybe getting a feedback survey out there sooner rather than later would be a good idea. I know we're going to potentially be in this for a long haul. You know, I'm at Rutgers right now, and we're already planning for the possibility of what's going to go on for online learning in the fall. And if that's the case for the schools, then I think it's not a bad idea to get feedback going into this sooner. I also wanted to offer my help if you need it in putting together a survey, just because that's the kind of thing as a experimental scientist I can help with, but that might not be ethically okay. I'm not sure how it works with the board. But I did want to bring up one additional small point, and that is that as an expert in children's cognitive development, you know, I'm a professor of this, and I publish papers on this regularly. I just wanted to stress, as we're thinking about moving forward into this, the importance of social development in these early years, and a very, very important part of the early school years is children having the social experience of being around each other, of learning how to interact with each other, of the little cohorts that develop and how to handle the sort of challenges that come up when you're disagreeing about something or teaching each other an idea, reading to each other. These kinds of social activities are sometimes built into the school day, as they have been at Bayberry, with co-reading, with just co-teaching and working in teams. And they come naturally through recess and lunch. And this is something that is obviously incredibly lacking right now as we deal with this very difficult challenge. And we're in remote learning. There are children that are single kids that don't have any kids around them right now. You know, we've tried to coordinate Skype dates just as parents with other kids, but I just want to stress how really critically important this social learning is at this age. And it's something that happens naturally when everyone's together in school, but it's not happening right now as we're sort of dealing with the current curriculum. So I just want to encourage some out-of-the-box thinking on ways in which we can be trying to incorporate that into the online learning. You know, there's going to be issues with the asynchronous nature of this and the challenges that different families are going to face in terms of when they can have computer time, when parents are going to be available. The teachers have been doing a good job trying to do some Zoom meetings, you know, once a week. But if there's other brainstorming or other ideas that can be created to create more opportunities for that social interaction for those kids, whether it be drop-in times that when families are free, they can have a Zoom classroom that they log into and say hi to each other, or something along those lines, I would like to strongly encourage the administration and the teachers to be thinking about that. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay, next up will be Shelley. That's your name. Where did it go?
It's CP.
There you go.
Everybody has trouble with that one. So this is Shelley CP, and I live at 105 Galloway here in Watchung. And I don't usually come into these meetings, but I want to just thank all the teachers and administrators, because it has been a tremendous amount of work that they've put forth, and I definitely see it. You know, I have 4 kids kind of spanning the educational levels of this, you know, district, some in district and some out of district. And it's kind of tagging on to what Liz just said. I don't have all the credentials that she has, but I just wanted to get a sense of, especially for the younger kids, what are the plans for increasing the level of engagement with especially the elementary school kids. You know, I have kids in the district at Valley View, as well as a high school, and then I have another student who is out of district, and there's a significant amount of time and encouragement from the teaching staff to have these kids on Zoom and interacting with one another, because that is such a critical piece of the learning. I know that my daughter, especially the elementary school, enjoys spending time with me. She is desperate for this kind of interaction with the teachers and missing seeing them. So I do think that that's a real urgent issue that you know, I would be happy to help facilitate the development of the surveys or whatever goes on there. But I did want to raise that because I think that's a very, very big concern. And then the other thing, and I appreciate the teachers that have been working with me, because I know that I did get a little heated on one of these topics. But the second thing, I am not an educator, so I will put that out there, is, you know, I understand the curriculum is designed to be comprehensive and that we're taking in all of the extras and making sure that these kids are getting exposure to all the subjects and making it like a regular school day. But, you know, given the amount of strains on parents and work days and so forth, is there any consideration into possibly adjusting some of this, or I don't want to say back to basics, because I realize that the extras are important, but that maybe they're not structured to exactly what the teachers say. I just, especially because if we're going to be in this in the long term, I think just access to supplies and you know, things that maybe the teachers think are a good idea or fun may not necessarily be appropriate, or there may be alternatives that the kids could engage in. So those are just, you know, two thoughts that I've had given the experience with my 4 over the past month.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have one more person with the hand up. I think you have the mic.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Francesca Escalera. I'm a parent of my daughter. She attends Bayberry. She's in kindergarten. I definitely want to commend the teachers, administration, and town and board for how they're handling education during this time. I also would like to advocate for a survey for parents to take in terms of different educational platforms. While I really love Google Classroom, I definitely think that we need to have more interaction with the teachers, even if they're pre-recorded videos. My daughter loves seeing everybody on YouTube, or, you know, just a shout out to Mrs. Tasker and Senior Eche. They're doing great jobs with just providing a face-to-face connection. So I definitely am in favor if we could definitely move towards more of that. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Currently do not see any other hands up. We'll wait another minute or so in case anyone else has a comment for the board. Okay, Mrs. Harvey, I believe we are finished. I don't see any more hands up.
I was muted. I was worried I wasn't going to get unmuted in time to close it out.
Can I just, Mr. Pepe, can you just give instruction again how people can raise their hands? Because I know that one of the parents that did speak had trouble initially being able to raise her hand.
Okay.
Just to say it one more time for them.
I can speak to what I see on my screen. Manny, if you want to correct anything I say, you can jump in too. Manny is our technology specialist who's actually controlling the host for us. But if I click on the bottom, there's a button. When you scroll, move your cursor to the bottom of the screen, a black bar pops up with some options. One of the options is participants. When I click that, I see a button that says raise hand. I believe that's the process. Manny, correct me if that's incorrect.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and then a list of participants comes up and you click on raise hand. Thank you, Jen.
And if that doesn't work, I'm on an iPad and there's a more drop down. And if you click the more, there's raise hand there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so before we adjourn, I had a quick question about board meeting times, since we're all together. Since we're home and most of us, have to work from home and whatnot, would the board be opposed to starting our regular scheduled board meetings a little earlier than 7:30? Or do we want to keep them at 7:30?
I'm fine with doing them earlier if people can accommodate.
Is there anybody not in favor of doing them earlier?
Dory, but
What time?
earlier, yeah, what do you, 6:30?
I mean, can we,
Earlier.
the administration is available? That's already been,
Sure.
are they available?
No, I mean, this is the first time I brought it up. So you guys are all here. We can all chime in as to, I mean, the administration is here as well. I didn't know if you guys wanted to start stuff like at 5:30, 6 o'clock, 6:30. It's just a question. We could keep them at the same time at 7:30. It's just a question to have, since we're all at home at this time.
I think the reason that we pushed them back was because people were commuting. So I was just remarking that if people are not commuting and it's, it shaves an hour off when they can get there, you might want to use that instead of starting later. That's all.
Yeah. Dory, you want us just to email you preference?
Sure. Is that good, George? You want to
It's
do
fine.
that?
The only question I have for Rich Pepe, though, is for the April 20th meetings. I think the notice already specified it at 7:30.
Yeah, no, we don't have to do it for the next one. I mean,
Okay.
like just after that, because if we're going to be in this situation for a while.
No, I'm open to that, of course.
Okay, so then
Anything that works for the board is good.
Okay, great. So just everybody send me an email to let me know, I guess, what time is a good time for you to start before the 7:30 time. Obviously not for the, not for the 7:30, the Monday meeting, but after that. And then also too, I just had a comment, the notice that went out for the community as to how to log in tonight. Is there any way for that to go out a little earlier for people? Because I think it went out around 4.
Absolutely.
Which only gave them about 2 hours if, they were trying to look for something. But is that possible for us to get that out a little earlier for them?
Yes, let me speak to that, Ms. Harvey. Thank you for bringing that up. So just so the public knows, with the things that have been in the news, we took very seriously the security of this meeting and trying to avoid some of the issues that have had in other public forums with online platforms, specifically with Zoom, which is the one we ended up going with. So we did a lot of research. I brought in our consultant from Northern Region Ed Services Commission, who provides our technology specialists. We had a lot of discussion about what ways we can use, what platforms would be best and what the security features are. You'll notice that tonight, everyone's mic was turned off when you came in and you had to request to have it turned on. While that's very irritating, that's one of the security features that was recommended in response to some of the issues that have happened on Zoom in the past. So with that said, the reason the notice went out so late was that notice went out pretty much minutes after we finished going through all of the different security features and making sure we had it right. Now that we got this, we should be able to send it out with the advertisement 48 hours before the meeting.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any other business to discuss? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
A second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for joining us this evening. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.